good. And we'll go from here. So thank you for attending. This is the first time we're doing a panel discussion, but our topic today is looking at sales and sales success and weighing the art of selling with the science of selling. And so I'm thrilled to have some great panelists with me. So I'm Mike Fritsch with PPS Consulting, and we do sales enablement and sales operations from the science side by enabling pipelines and that sort of thing and building processes. And since we've got a smaller group, I'll just go around and let each of the panelists introduce themselves, and we'll go from there. So John, I'll start with you. We'll put you on the spot.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm John Sable. I'm the Vice President of Sales for a sales marketing services training and development organization called Jack B. Keenan Inc., based out of San Francisco Bay Area. So we've been around for about 3.5 decades, working on sales skills development for all those types of teams.
Great. Steve, how about you?
Steve Heise. I'm with Performance Sales Management. I've spent more years than I care to really admit in the sales arena, managing enterprise sales teams, $150, $200 million worth of sales, and just recently went out on my own. And what I do is fractional sales management. My focus really is around small to medium-sized companies right now, because oftentimes they can't afford, senior sales leadership. So I help them grow, and keenly attuned to both sides of the art and the science of selling, as probably all my colleagues are.
Great. And Robert?
Yeah, Rob Jablonski from Recharge Consulting, the company which is associated to Sales Acceleration, which is the largest in the world. I think a company providing the fractional VP of sales or fractional CRO positions. I, like Steve, I have spent more than 27 years in large companies running both P&Ls, operations, but my true passion is really in sales, in growth, in people, in processes, trying to combine, I think, this human aspect with, the process aspect and the system aspect. And I think that this is going to be interesting conversation about, which of those is going to take the lead at specific, moments of the company developments.
Great. Well, to kind of start off, let me ask more of a broader question. So I made the premise that the science of sales is more around process, and it's kind of the measurable things and the repeatable things. And I've got this documented, and here are the steps that I follow and that sort of thing. Whereas the art is maybe more subtle. Maybe there's more personality. There's the ability to read the room, just kind of some soft skills or things that are perhaps not as easily replicated. And obviously it's not one or the other, but it's a mix of both. And I kind of like, where's your view of the ideal sweet spot? What would you, given that definition, is it 50-50 or something else? And does it depend on the situation, like the industry or the sales cycle or the size of the customer? Robert, let me start with you and get your thoughts, and then I'll ask the other folks to kind of chime in.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mike. I appreciate that. So the first question I have is that what is really the sales success? Because I think that there are so many answers that the number of people in the room, or the number of people who are going to ask this question about. But I think that's in the end of the day, having these 27 years of my experience, I would say that sales success is about customer success, engaging with us and trying to stay with us for the long period of time. So in essence, in the end of the day, that is going to be also quite a lot about solution selling, whatever the big solution or the tiny solution is going to be there. And I think that there are a couple of different dimensions which are crossing my mind right now when I'm thinking about what is really taking the the lead. Is it going to be a science? Is it going to be art, or maybe something else, or maybe a blend of that? But I think that in my head, at least, after these years of in the business, is I make a distinction between what is sales and what is selling. For me, sales, this is about numbers, okay, hitting the quota, order book value, contribution margin, or maybe new clients. And I think that this is, in the end of the day, that is extremely important, isn't it? But I think that the other thing which really matters is about selling. And selling, this is the entire approach. I wouldn't call it, the process, but this is entire approach, holistic approach, and to create long-term profitability and long-term growth. Because I think that in the end of the day, this is not about a luck. This is not about, hitting just a big client. But I think in the end of the day, we are running our own companies. We are helping a number of different clients. And I think that this is not about, just hitting, a big client and having $1 million in your order book, but this is about building kind of, system around this that we are able to have repetitive success, not through the one person, but through the teams. And here, is this question, how much this is about, this art, this, unique factor that everybody of us does have, and how much this is about, something that we are able, to teach, to build, to really scale around, having the processes. And when I think about that, maybe I'm completely wrong, but I think that there are 3 factors that you need to take into account. This is about the knowledge of the salesperson or the sales teams. This is about the skills, which is this, this intangible factor. And this is also about the discipline in the end of the day. Because if we would like to have the repetitive success, this has to be a discipline in the end of the day. And I think, guys, that there are going to be a moments that you need to have, this spark, this skill, which is going to take leads, and you are going to, to just excel. But I think that long-term, really, those people who really excel long-term, the great salespeople, not the good salespeople, they work continuously on those 3 things: the knowledge, the skills, and the discipline.
And Angelo rather, thanks for joining us. We've got a small group, so we're actually give us a little intro on yourself and what interested you in this panel discussion. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I'm going to do it anyway.
I'm having trouble with my speaker and microphone here.
Okay.
All right. So for some reason, something's not working right here. So give me a chance here and let me get this set up.
All right.
We can hear you very well.
We can hear you fine. Yeah. So
yeah, there's something's a little
feel free
crazy.
to chime in. Great. Well, Robert, you talked about the definition of sales success, and I think that's an interesting perspective to put in to say, well, what are we trying to get? And Steve, any comments on how you would define sales success?
Yeah, I mean, Robert did a great job of looking at sales success. Maybe I'll kind of approach it from a different angle and from my perspective. Whether I was managing teams of salespeople or right now I'm working with small to medium-sized businesses, 2 to 10 salespeople, I'll kind of make the connection between what our discussions are around their sales teams. And oftentimes it is, I have 5 salespeople on my sales team. They've been through Myers-Briggs, they've taken the DISC test, they've done the assessment. They all kind of slot in where they're supposed to for salespeople. They've had similar training, right? They've had similar experience. But I got this one person that really excels, and the other 4 are kind of at a steady state, right? They're C+, they're B-, but I've done things like I fired some and brought them back in. That hasn't really fixed it. I hit them with a bigger stick. That hasn't really fixed it. So why does this one person seem to excel? And if you look at the research, it'll tell you that some people have an intuitive process. A lot of the folks on this call might be the same way. They sell intuitively. It's a process in their head. If you ask them to explain it, they can't do it, but they follow this process down the line. So the magic in that situation often is to come in and map out a process and apply that process over these other folks, right? And oftentimes they'll excel to the point where they're surpassing this intuitive person, right? And then if you apply, I said they have the same training. If you apply coaching and mentoring on top of that, you can take these C+ players up to an A-. So I know it's not one or the other, but that's what I often see in the marketplace. And when people ask me to come in and help them, that's generally the first place that they're looking at. I hope that makes sense. It's a little different than Robert's approach, but I'm sure John will have a different spin on that. But that's what's good about having gentlemen like these folks on the phone.
We all come from a slightly different perspective, right?
Yeah.
I always think about sales as how am I adding value? And, how does a salesperson truly add value to a customer or a client? And when I think about it that way, I don't know the answer to it until I understand what value is at the customer or client, right? So how do I go in there and understand what they value? Is it, is there business value? Maybe it's political, maybe it's personal. You never know, right? So you kind of need to assess that. So when you talk about, is it art or science? I think it's curiosity, right? It's like you want to go in, you want to understand from the customer's perspective what value is, how they measure it, how they think about it. And once you understand them, then maybe you're in a position to get them to understand you, right? That's that Stephen Covey thing, understand to be understood.
Right.
I came at sales from kind of the marketing trajectory, right? Started off literally as an engineer, joined a company that sold semiconductor capital equipment. I didn't even know how to spell semiconductor when I got there. And, was taught kind of early on, John, go out and form relationships, ask a lot of questions, and not, there's no stupid question, but, get good at it. Make sure you ask the questions that help you understand what the client wants, what's critical to them, what's important to them. And then you can start talking to them about what you've got to help, right? So it was kind of that value process. So, and the whole thing about, look at your top performers and, look across the board. How do you take the best practices in a given company from a sales perspective and make those the common practices? I mean, that's a lot of what we, as anytime we come in and act as consultants or try to support a company, right? We go in and we see what they do. And then we try to figure out why the successful people are really successful. And then we try to just, how do you get the whole team to be capable of that, right? How do you make those best practices common? And so you're going to find stuff that it's going to be domain related. You're going to find stuff that, maybe the sell's really technical. Maybe the science is really important. Like, I've never been in a sales situation where I had somebody, kicking doors for me to get them open. Like I always had to go do that myself. But, that's a different skill, right? So each of those, I think building both on what Robert and Steve both said, there's a little bit of both.
Yeah. And your comment about curiosity is a great one. It was, as I was preparing for this and kind of looking at the concept of art versus science, I think there was an Einstein quote about the artists and the scientists are unified by curiosity about the world,
if you're curious enough, right, you're gonna learn about your customer's business. Like the company I work for today taught me 25 years ago, but due diligence. I mean, we all do it as sales professionals, right? But know the company, know what they're saying, know what they're doing, know who in common before you walk in there, because now you can ask better questions. Right? You're curious about their business and their success and what's going on with them. Now you can be curious about the person and what they're trying to achieve and what's value to them. And once you've got that mapped out, I don't know, selling seems a little easier, right? You're solving a problem maybe.
So, we've talked a little bit about the superstar, in a sales team, and the ability to try to replicate that and bottle what they have, if for lack of a better word. But as we do that consulting, as you've gone in, I mean, how much Steve, you mentioned, maybe the C players actually end up surpassing the superstar because you're taking it out of his or her head and putting it on the ground. But what's, how much can you bottle in your experience of that? I'll ask each of you, and is that the best approach?
I think, well, from a team perspective, absolutely, right? I mean, John touched on that, right? How do you get the whole team performing at a certain level, right? You can't continue to fire people, hire people. I mean, you can't, I guess you can take like the New York Yankees approach to things where you just spend as much money as you can and hire the top-notch salespeople. But most companies can't afford to do that, right? Those people don't necessarily stay around. So by applying process, you can absolutely raise the level of everybody on the team. You know, you think about the components of it, right? Are training. You're giving them the skills to do that, the talent to do that. Then you look at coaching, which essentially is developing that talent or that skill set to give them the ability to go out and do that. And then if you look at mentoring, you're sharing experiences with that person that gives them the wisdom to do that beyond their selling experience in years. So if you apply those things and they have a process to follow, they're gonna raise their game. I'll use objections. That's always a big one. Objections. So average salespeople will melt under objections, right? Because they've been saying, hey, you got to be able to handle all these objections, and they got 100 of them in their mind, right? And so when they get an objection, they just melt down and they don't do very well at it. If you have a process laid out and you're coaching them, and you're saying, here's where you are in the sales cycle, right? You, like John said, you've established what they want to do, what they want to make better, how they want to change. You've quantified that. Here's what the top 2 or 3 objections are going to be, because you know this because of the process, right? Then they can focus on that, and they tend to do very well. So it's kind of left, right, left, right, left, right. You know, there's always going to be that idiot savant, right, that can play the guitar and can't read music and do whatever, right? And it's always true with sales too. But you know, that's great that guy can do it. But if you got 8 other people, you want them in an A- kind of a place. So yeah, you can step them up to that if that makes sense to you, Mike.
Yeah. All right.
That's interesting perspective, Steve. And I think that, you know, guys, I don't know if you agree with me, but one thing that is, you know, like a pre-definition of, you know, of the salesperson before we started with the coaching, before we start with the training, is the attitudes. What kind of, you know, attitudes these guys do have? Why they come to the company? What are they able to offer? Because on attitudes, you are able to build the skills. And, you know, if the person doesn't want to perform the job, doesn't, you know, the passion for that, doesn't have, you know, the heart, you can train them, you can coach them, but this is not going to work. Yes. So I think that this is, you know, like a prerequisite for me. Whenever, you know, I'm having the situation, you know, that we need to exchange people on a team. Business owners, you know, the smaller companies, they go after, you know, take someone from the business, from the industry, from the competition. I'm saying this is not the most important. Hey, we are able to train them on, you know, this technical stuff, you know, on the product and the services. But if those people are going to have wrong attitudes, which are not going to fit to our culture, to what we want to attain in this business, this is not going to take off. So I think that this is also one of, you know, the elements that we need to take into play. And I think that if you have the right attitudes, if you have the right culture in the company, you are able to play, you know, all the time with either, you know, more art or more science into this.
Yeah, and Tom has a question that he threw out. Thank you, Tom. When you all look at the second tier sellers, what separates them from the top tier? So most of our second tier sellers are well-versed in methodologies and processes, so it's not just knowledge. Is it attitude, fear, motivation, wisdom? What's that extra oomph that after you've trained all the skills and so on that makes a difference?
That's you know, for me, it's like the best people just have this indomitable willpower, right? They're just gonna, they want to be successful. They're gonna learn. They're willing to learn from each experience and take it with them. And they're also teaching others, right? And so, you know, there's that, it's just that, I don't know, I used to call it hunger. Like very much like what Robert was just saying, right? And also Steve, is that there are some fundamental like attitudes, confidence, you know, things that you're looking for, certain types of attitudes, but it's really, they want to do the job. They want to learn how to do the job. They want to be successful at doing the job, and they want to be on a team that's winning, right? And if you can find those people, look, if you need to train them on, how to start a meeting, or if you need to train them on how to form a relationship, or you need to help develop their ability to ask the right types of questions and then do even better, discovery with guided questions. You want to teach them not to go for the PowerPoint deck and just show that right away, right? Yeah. This is all doable, right? When they got me, again, engineer, I thought my job was to put foils up on an overhead projector. Boy, as soon as I learned that my job was to go in there and form a relationship, be really curious about that client, ask a lot of questions, right? Make sure I understood what they were doing. The number of PowerPoint presentations I showed after that went down dramatically.
Sure.
We had discussions about problems and solutions that we could offer, and objective handling suddenly got easier too, because they had just gone on this journey with me from, the first conversation to, this guy gets me, he understands me, he understands my industry, and he's restating to me what he learns, right? So, what separates the top from the bottom? I think it's your intention, your willpower to want to learn. And I also think, for me, I'm an experienced guy, right?
Yeah.
I took a lot of training classes on sales. I'd go out and try it and I'd fail. So I'd come back and take the class again and I'd try it again. And it was just the experience, after a period of time, it's like you got better at it, right?
Yeah.
But I'd always look for those top performers. I'd look for the Steves and I'd look for the Roberts, and I'd watch what they would do and I'd try to mimic it. And I would ask to go on the meetings with them, and I would have them critique me if I went, let's go do this call together.
Right.
And then you tell me what I did good and where the opportunities were, because I wanted to be good at it. Sorry,
Yeah.
lot of babbling.
No, makes a lot of sense.
I'm happy to jump in and take a stab at Tom's question also. I think Jonathan and Robert and I are all saying the same thing. Primarily, you want desire, right? If the person doesn't have desire to go do this, don't leave them on your team for another day. Get rid of them and go find somebody that does, right? You mentioned methodology and process. Those are different, right? Those are two separate things. Sales methodology is the training, we talked about it, and process is something different, right? So Tom, if you have your top sales performer and you follow him around and get a Visio chart and lay out the process and how this guy handles the sales cycle, if you have that done in your company, then you have a process that you can pass off to the people that are not performing as well. But if you build that process, then and Robert and John both touched on this, that allows you to hire. Not for experience, I need a guy that's been in the industry for 20 years, but you hire for potential, because you get a guy that has the desire and he has the potential. And then if you have a good sales management team in place and a good process, you can take that person and you're getting them at a reasonable price and they're going to stay, right? So, and then you can move them along. I don't know, Tom, if that answered your question, because I think John and Robert and I would say we'd have to see your team and kind of where you're at to give you a full, diagnosis, but that's just some thoughts to mull around.
Great. So let me ask.
One of the important, I think, areas when we speak about this, ambition, willingness to grow, is that we need to understand and distinguish about, the healthy ambition and the ill ambition. The healthy one is constructive, yes, and healthy doesn't mean that I want to be the best on this team. I don't care about you. I don't care about you. It's about me. And the healthy one, this is not about being best. I want to be better every time I'm doing something. And this is about, really self-reflection. This is about learning. This is, again, about this curiosity that Jonathan was speaking to. This is about asking questions. This is not about being, just in yourself, in your limbo, but not being afraid of the clients, but not being afraid of your colleagues, yes, and asking them, hey, what have you done? Can I learn anything from that? And I think that, this distinguishes, for me, also the great salespeople from the not that great salespeople, that we are afraid asking questions, we are afraid being curious, we are afraid to challenge ourselves, and so if you are that person, you are not going to be great.
Sure. Well, I'm going to shift the topic a little bit, but before I do, let me pause and Aaron, Angelo, Jeffrey, Jose, any other questions to build on this topic? Anything you want to ask before I throw out another one?
Well, I am familiar with the methodology that Jonathan was talking about because I'm a trained session leader for JBK's demand generation or selling beyond the product methodology.
There's an endorsement.
So
Yeah.
yeah, this wasn't planned, but I recognized a lot of the vocabulary and
Right.
I can, yeah. So one of the things that we realized at NI is, as we start focusing more towards directing our customer operations teams towards a sales support kind of motion, but also a customer engagement motion where they are looking for opportunities, right? And upselling or cross-selling as well. Not just the traditional operations roles where you are simply doing some data entry for order management or simply sending out a quote and forgetting about the customer, but more proactively engagement, right? One of the things that I have realized is that people struggle to see, themselves in that kind of role because they naturally say, well, I'm not a seller. Why am I supposed to do this? Or why am I supposed to follow this methodology, right? If I'm not selling, I don't have a quota, right? Or so I think that's a struggle that we have seen, and I don't know if you have experience with customer-facing teams that are not necessarily in a sales role, but in a supporting role that has constant customer engagement and customer interactions, and how you empower them with enablement that really drives sales success. Because at the end of the day, customer operations has to contribute to the bottom line, right? And we are measured against contribution margins and such. So I was just curious about that component of customer success versus sales.
Yeah, let me
That's
weigh
a
in
great
and I'll let
that's
the
a
other
great
folks.
topic, and I think that it refers to what we have started with. What is really the sales success? And I think that when you start, to really, think about that and asking different questions. What is sales success? Is it just to get the client, get his order or her order, or this is have really client, excelling and staying with us, for long and being able to promote our businesses to the others? And I think that this is really critical question, because is it about the hit and run, or is it about something bigger than that?
Yeah,
And
I
then
think that's
the next that
exactly
I've been to big companies that we had this customer success people, maybe customer support, and they were in the beginning somewhere in the shadow. But actually, if you think through this, these people have to be in a spotlight, because these people are going to handle all of these objections from the clients. They are coming with claims. They are coming with different problems. You guys are really solving the problems, for making these clients not only to stay with us, but being really our promoters. And I think my question always, in situations like that is, how these teams are really, included in the bigger, sales and marketing, processes and bigger teams. Are you just on top of that? Are you just on the margin, or you are really considered to be the part of the problem or the part of the solution?
Yeah, I think that's very important. And in many ways, I think the folks on the pointy end of the spear of delivering the value or interacting with the customer after the sale, in many ways are more important, but maybe more akin to the science side. And I say that from the perspective that you want them to be able to execute and deliver that value to the customer. And often that's where systems and processes and alignment is what makes a big difference, because it's like the customer, he bought from you, he needs something, he needs to be helped. If you have a crappy system and that front end person that's got to either deliver a service or answer a technical question, if their system sucks or they don't have good methodologies for that, they're gonna be hamstrung, and it's gonna be harder for them to make that customer successful. And where you can get all those teams together and align from incentives and KPIs and metrics, to me, that's the science side, and that's kind of stuff that I love. So I'm a little biased, but I think that's a really good point. Yeah.
It is, and if I'm going to pile on, Mike. Right, I tend to agree with you. And Jose, what you asked, right, is really broad. Right, there's a lot of things that go into this. The culture in your company, right? In most companies, that are sales focused companies, everybody's in sales. And the message, this art and science thing, the message to the team is you don't have to be this artist, this idiot savant, right? Because we have processes, we have tools, we know the top 5 things that your people are talking to that could lead to additional sales, and then it's just tactical sales training and applying that process to make them competent at what they do, right? So and there's so much more you could get into, compensation and I mean, this could be a 2-day conversation, but I think Mike's spot on, right? If you good processes in place and expectations and change that mindset that you have to be the life of the party and this huge extrovert to be successful at it, that I think that could go a long way in moving the needle for you.
Yeah. And I'm gonna use that as go ahead, John, then I'm gonna bridge what Steve said to go in another direction.
Yeah, it just the thing there, everyone's in sales. Everything is sales, Jose, if you think about it, right? Yeah. So, having the fundamental skills that allow you to, again, just go back to a simple premise, understand to be understood. So if you're a tech support person, using nice car, using those skills to make sure you understand the problem in a lot of detail and you've restated it, and you can get agreement from the customer that you understand what they're saying before you try to start solving the problem. That's sales. That's an amazing skill set. If it's looking at the whole set of issues a particular client has. I mean, if you're in tech support, you can see everything, right? You're there. You very, very well may be able to ask questions that allow you to add even more value. But again, it's the understanding part, right? So JBK got me 30 years ago. I was an engineer, right? Only thing I knew was tell people stuff. That was it. I'd never asked a question in my life. And I took that course and I went out and saw customers, but then I also turned it internal. I had to go to a QBR. I got people asking me questions. Well, I didn't always know the answer, but I found that if I had a good question back to make sure I clarified, it gave me a little more time. And then I just kept building on that, right? And so it was like, the ability to apply what we call sales skills or soft skills, whether it's art or science, whether it's understanding somebody's Myers-Briggs profile and knowing how you're going to have to talk to them, all those things, right? It just turn 360 degrees. It doesn't matter what you're doing. That's value, right? You're going to value. So if you're in customer success, or you're in tech support, or you're in applications engineering, or all that type of stuff, a lot of those same skills all apply. That's what, if you go look and see what makes your best applications engineer be the best, you're probably going to find out that they do a really good job understanding what they're being asked to do. Probably. Right?
All right, I'm going to build off of what Steve had said and shift the direction just slightly. So let's talk about the importance of incentives, both formal and informal. And so that might be commission structure, compensation, but also KPIs, metrics, what are and what the heck the boss calls up and asks about. So where does that fit in the picture? And there's a cliche that the only thing that matters to the salesperson is the commission. And so you can shift a whole sales organization's actions just by tweaking that little commission table, and then everything happens.
You could end up with all kinds of actions that you don't want to.
So let's go into that a little bit, and there might be some humorous stories. But John, why don't you start?
I believe that everybody wants to make money. I believe everybody wants to make more money. I'm not gonna try to hide behind that. If I have a job, I want more money. Fair. If I look back on my career, and when I get together with people and talk to them about their careers, they light up when they start telling me the story about the team they were on that just killed it. And they were close knit and they worked together And yeah, was there competition? Absolutely. Right. Back to Robert's point, there's healthy and there's unhealthy, right? There was competition, but it was competition for the team to win. I think the cultural piece is really important, right? And if everybody's winning and everybody's making money, that's great. So yeah, do you need good comp plans? Yeah, you do. Do people need to get paid? Yeah. Do they need to feel like they're getting paid more? Absolutely. Do they feel like they're getting paid fairly for killing themselves, working 80-hour weeks to land a critical? Yes. Yeah, all that needs to happen. But they're not going to, I mean, if I talk to 10 people about that, they'd light up when they told me about the team they were on or the organization they were in that was really successful and how they wish they could do that again.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or how they're trying to make the one they're on be that way. That's really important, right? I mean, and I was lucky enough to have that happen 3 times in my career, but the first time was the best because it just gave me this insatiable desire to have that again, right? So money's important. If anybody says it isn't, I don't know, but money's really important.
Yeah. Steve, comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, let's pile on to Jonathan here, right? I mean, it's building that culture of a team. That's up to the sales manager, right? That's up to sales leadership to build that team that you want to be on, right? I mean, it doesn't just happen. There's a design there. There's a connection between a manager and all his people, knowing them personally. And like Jonathan, I've done this for a while. Some of the people that I've worked for and have worked for me are still some of my best friends, right? And this is after 40 years, right? And so it's more than just a work relationship. Compensation, I always say there's no perfect comp plan. There's a perfect comp plan for you, Mr. Customer, but there's no perfect one that you can just cookie cutter, right? And you have to understand what you're looking to do. And to get back to what you said, Mike, KPI and metrics, right? This is where technology comes into play. CRM is common practice, and CRM and digital upfront marketing are becoming one and the same. So it allows you to take process and automate it for your team, but you can lay out KPIs and metrics, and so you can see what someone is doing, right? Are they following the process? Are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? So you can help coach them and change behavior that way. Very important, but I have to finish it by saying I've never fired someone that didn't look good in Salesforce.com, right? They know how to put all the stuff in the system, but they just weren't producing sales. So that's where, this is where the art of knowing that there's a line where you've got to say, okay, enough's enough. This isn't the company or the team or the job for you. So
yeah, I want to expand on that a little bit. So, from the perspective of CRM or any of the systems you use, where is that sweet spot between, is it because often there might be a system and people just know what to put in the damn thing, right? But they're not using it to do their job, or it's like this bureaucratic thing that it's really just in the way of us servicing the customer. I'm going to throw it out just at that and just ask you guys to respond and kind of like, what do you look at? What do you try to optimize, and where do things go wrong and where do they work right?
I'm happy to start off. I mean, I want to hear what John and Robert has to say, because I'm absolutely interested in what my peers have to say. But setting up, every salesman hates CRM, period. They don't like it, right? No one likes to do that because usually if you use the disc, you have high D, high I's, and that mundane task of doing that. If you're a pure play salesperson, you don't like to do it, but it becomes something that you have to do for your job. But if you design it and implement it accordingly, and that's up to the company and the sales management team, and it becomes an asset to these guys or these gals, then it becomes something that they're willing to do. You can have automated follow-up, drip sort of marketing if it's attached to your CRM. And that's something they don't have to do. So you can make it something sweet for them too, other than just you're beating them with a big hammer, get your calls in there, contact information, right? I mean, and you can use a hammer too. You can use the big stick with your comp. Part of your comp is attached to that. I'll stop there, right? I could go on forever.
Robert, thoughts?
Robert has to say.
Yeah, so I will give you the example. Once I have been moved to one of the divisions, $2 billion in revenue, and they had 27 attributes to identify, the client. And I asked them, the managers, the sales managers, are you really able to track this? If this is 27 attributes for the client, if this is going to be like, 50 maybe attributes, when it comes to opportunity, what are you able really to follow through and follow up? What kind of conversations are you able to have? So I think to Steve's point, I think it has to happen. It has to be documented. It has to be registered. And this is a repository of everything what we know and do to the clients. But it has to be doable, swallowable, that we are able to go through this when we have these sales conversations with the people. So let's focus on what's really matter. And let's forget about all of those bells and whistles. You would like to measure this, and that maybe is important. No, this is going just to create a mess, and people are not going to buy in, and they will just disconnect from that. So my approach is always like this. Let's cut off all the fat and let's focus on what is really important, on the muscles. What is making this business to change? How the people are able to understand, to work through that. And gradually, when we grow and we understand how to navigate this, maybe from time to time we are able to put something extra here, make the enhancements, but avoid all of this customizations, avoid all of those bells and whistles, and this temptation to measure everything. Because I think what is important, alluding a little bit to your first part of the question about the comp plans and motivation systems. There is no ideal comp plan. And it's not going to happen. This is about, what is going to be communicated and what is going to be addressed by the sales manager every week. What kind of feedback is going to be given to individual and to the teams? What kind of discussions are going to derive from that? And what kind of changes are going to happen to comp plan going forward? I'm working right now with the client who didn't change their comp plans for the last 17 years. And they complain that the salespeople do not follow their intentions, and their salespeople are not able to find new clients. How can they?
Yeah.
John, any thoughts on that topic beyond what we've said?
Yeah, so here, maybe I'm gonna put myself in a box. My whole approach to I've never used a CRM. So I have literally zero experience. I got to look at the front of a CRM once. I was on LinkedIn. I saw Mike Fritsch was running a thing about pipeline. So I joined it. And I learned about as much CRM as I ever wanted to know. Now, did we have Excel spreadsheets? Were there reports? Yeah, I had all the time. Similar type things. General manager of a $750 million business. I had all kinds of things telling me who the clients were and, when we were going to get what and all that type of stuff. For me, it was, I guess I'm not answering the question.
No, I wanted you to answer it this way.
Get on an airplane and go to the customer. That's what I did. And it doesn't scale, right? But I would go out, I'd go with the sales guys, I'd go with the marketing guys, the people, I would just go. I'd go see the customers and I would start to create a spreadsheet. First, it was in my mind, then it was on my computer. And it was always about trying to create that culture. This doesn't scale, right? We're in a world today of CRMs. And so when I saw Mike's pipeline thing, I thought, hey, it's a baby step in the right direction. You put it all in a sheet. You've got a couple metrics you can look at, a little bit like what Robert's saying, right? We don't need all this stuff. There's a couple things here that are important. It's like Steve was saying, my God, this is, we're filling all this information in. Does anybody like it? So to me, it's always, what's the outcome? Right. What is the outcome we want? Then let's put the system on. Unfortunately, sometimes I feel like these bigger CRM
comes in first.
It comes in first and you're trying to make it fit, right? So, how many times have I, and why am I here today, right? Mike invited me because I'm still talking to him about his pipeline smart sheets capability. Because how many times have I started working with a client, they've got a CRM, but they're trying to pivot. They're trying to do something new. They're trying to penetrate a new market. They want to, maybe it's moving to a solution and their people have never sold it before, whatever. I'm literally, without saying it, saying put in a shadow methodology for measuring the success on that's outcome driven. And when you get to the point that you know what you're doing, well, yeah, then make it part of your CRM.
Yeah.
You know, and I've got pushback on that. People said, well, you're telling us to operate off the system. I'm like, I don't know what I'm telling you. I'm just telling you that, you know, you're talking about all these things you're tracking, and I don't understand how they help you solve the customer's problem, right? I don't understand how you get the business.
Right.
So unfortunately, I'm not the CRM guy, right?
Yes, no, and that's why that's part of why you're on the call. And I'm more in your camp. So I straddle the world because I got my legs in both places, in that I'm a firm believer in being able to measure things and to have a system, but I think it's got to be your process. It's got to be simple. All the things that Steve and Robert said, and that's why that's where I play, is in make it simple, make it fit your thing. And I use, so Jose gave a JBK endorsement, and John just talked about Smart Sheets, so that was a thumbs up for me. But
I now, as soon as Jose said he did that, now I know all about Jose, because I've heard all about Jose. So thank you.
So, but yeah, you know, I think it's got to enable your business. It's got to make your customers successful, and it's got to be, unless it's easy to use, nobody's going to use it, right? So to Steve's point of like, hey, some of this auto responding stuff, or some of these ticklers, things that make the person's life easier, if it can, is really essential. And if it's just a pain in the ass, people will do the minimal compliance, and they probably will be using the world's largest ERP system, which is Excel, right? They're going to be just doing their own spreadsheets in the background, and you know, typing away and so on.
And having you know, having somebody holding you accountable to your pipeline or your bookings or your revenue or the stat, that's important, right? But again, what we said all the way back at the beginning, it's your desire to be in sales that's going to make you successful, right? The accountability thing, just, you know, that helps you to have to talk about it once in a while, but you know, sales is sales.
No, good. Well, we've got about 8 minutes left. I don't want to go to the very end, so I want to pause. And if anybody on the call has any additional questions or anything they'd like us to dive into, so unmute and ask one, or put it in the chat box. And if not, then we'll finish up. Let me let each of the panelists you know, kind of make a closing statement and say, how can you guys help anybody that's on the call, and you know, if they're interested, how do they reach out to you? Which I'm going to say, go to their thing and click on their LinkedIn and message them. But so Robert, I'll let you go first, just kind of closing statement. And if anybody wants to grab you afterwards, what's the thing that you will do with them?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. It's just, you know, maybe a remark. Right now, we are in the midst of Olympics, and, you know, we have great athletes there. Many of them have fantastic talents. But you know what? This is not about the talent. They are putting many hours, and a lot of methodology, and they are studying this, and they're getting better by, you know, 1 second, you know, on a kilometer or, you know, mile every time. And I think that this is, you know, something, you know, like a great analogy for me, you know, for sales. This is not that you are great at some point. This is about the progress you are making, yes? And this is about, you know, making this, you know, something, you know, a little bit better every time that you are doing. And this is probably, you know, my commitment to my client as well. This is about, you know, having, you know, this perspective that I'm able to take you to understand what is your ideal client, where there is areas for us to grow your business, what is your value proposition, have some really important discussions, and making sure that we have the right people in the right seats who are able to execute that. And I 100% agree with what Jonathan has said, that sometimes people are thinking about systems, you know, CRMs, you know, Salesforce.com, that this is going to be the silver bullet. No way. if you don't have the wrong people in wrong seats, and these people are not willing to make these changes, you could have you can invest millions of dollars in those systems, documentations, and so forth, but you are not going to move the needle. So I think that this is important, and I think Steve has been talking about that. This is not only about sales management, this is about sales leadership, and leadership is not about numbers.
Great, thanks. Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I just, we talked, there's a lot of best practices that were thrown out by Robert, by John, hopefully by myself with my ramblings, right? But it's how you apply them to your business. I mean, if I did analysis, I come back with 125 pages of best practices. And if it could be solved in an hour, just think about, how companies would move forward and what time they'd have left. It's a little bit more complicated than that, right? I mean, you look at your upfront marketing, you look at the sales process, you look at technology, you look at your sales skills, you look at how you manage your sales teams. Those are all factors for every single company that's going to be slightly different, right? It's how you adapt those to what you have. And I guess in closing, I would say, if you have tier 2 players, you can make them tier 1 players. You can. People do it all. Successful companies do it all the time. Either spend a lot of money and buy tier 1 or take your tier 2 players and bump them up a notch. It can be done. You're going to have to get rid of some of them to Robert's point, right? If they're not cut out for this, they don't want to do it. Doesn't matter. All the technology won't help you there, but there's ways to do it, ways to manage it, ways to measure it. So don't give up. It can be done.
Great. John?
Yeah, and I think it's, if it's kind of funny, I hear all three of us talking, and it's really, you got to get from point A to point B, and you're not going to do that overnight. So you kind of have to start with understanding where you are. Where are you, right? Do you have a process? Do you have the right people? Do they have the right skills? Do they have the right attitudes? And then you basically chart your path from there, and there'll be things that you can move quickly, and there'll be things that you're going to move over time, right? But it's really about making sure you understand where you are and where you want to go and what the outcome is that you want. And then take the people, upskill them, give them development workshops, give them coaching, set up mentoring programs in your company, all those things, right? It's very unique to each company and where they are in their life cycle.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, I really appreciate everybody that participated. Special thanks to you smart guys that helped me look better on this panel discussion. And if you want to reach out to any of us, just go to the event page and you'll see the speakers there. You can see it. Reach out and get help, and we'll just go from there. So stay tuned for additional panel discussions down the road, and I'll send out a link to the recording. I don't know if anybody would ever want to watch it again, but we'll have it, and you can.
It's a learning experience for me.
There you go.
You're like, okay, what did I look like on that? And I want to back down like Robert.
I always.
I'm pretty sure my boss is